In the midst of World War II's chaos, a peculiar moment unfolded on the battlefield that would become legendary among US Marines. 50 cal bullets pierced the tank like paper. US Marines couldn't stop laughing at the Japanese Hago. Captures a stark contrast to the horrors of war. While real battles raged and countless lives were affected, the resilience and humor of those who fought created a narrative that remains both poignant and illuminating. Some characters in this story have been fictionalized for dramatic effect, but the events are grounded in reality, showcasing the human spirit even in dire circumstances. To delve deeper into these captivating historical narratives, subscribe to our channel. Gain access to meticulously researched facts, unique perspectives, and clear explanations that bring history to life. With regular uploads, you'll stay informed and engaged with the stories that shaped our world. Don't miss out. Join our community today. The early months of 1945 marked a turning point in the Pacific Theater, where US Marines were embroiled in fierce battles against Japanese forces. The fight for the islands was not merely a clash of arms, but a battle of wits and technology. As the Marines advanced on Iwo Jima, they encountered myriad types of enemy equipment, including the Japanese Hago tanks, a design that had become emblematic of Japan's struggle to keep pace with the mechanization of modern warfare. The Hago, intended to support infantry and provide mobility on the battlefield, had a reputation for vulnerability. It was a lightweight tank, conceived in the early 1930s, and by 1945, it was outclassed by heavier American armor and weaponry. Marines, accustomed to the thundering might of their Sherman tanks, found the Hago's thin armor amusingly inadequate. The sight of these ironclad obsolescences lumbering across the black volcanic sands ignited a notorious blend of incredulity and laughter among the ranks. 50 caliber bullets pierced the tank like paper, they would later recount between bouts of humor on the front lines, finding camaraderie in the absurdity of their circumstances. This laughter, however, belied the reality of war. It provided a necessary release from the tension that simmered just below the surface on Iwo Jima, a brutal battleground where every moment could turn lethal. Each encounter with the Hago became an opportunity for grim humor. Observers noted how the Marines would often take aim, their rifles and machine guns barking merrily at the beleaguered Japanese contraptions. The implications of these moments were subtle but resonant, highlighting the disparity of technology between the two forces. The Marines were not just engaging enemy vehicles, they were witnessing the consequences of a rigid military doctrine that left the Japanese command unable to adapt to the American pace of warfare. Their strategy relied on tenacity and the spirit of sacrifice, qualities that had marked earlier victories but faltered against the overwhelming mechanized assault of American forces. As the fighting progressed, the Hago's presence became symbolic of Japan's broader struggles in the war. The tank represented a once formidable military philosophy, now rendered obsolete by the shifting tide of technological advancement. The Marines' derision masked a deeper understanding. They were pitted against a formidable adversary whose fierce resolve belied the inadequacies of their equipment. This duality of laughter amidst the chaos reflected the complex psychology of combat, where moments of levity often punctuated the harsh realities of life and death. In the course of battle, the Hago's mobility, which had originally been a tactical advantage, became a liability. Rather than skirmishing at distance where they might evade detection, their crews often found themselves fighting in an environment that favored the American infantry's superior firepower. Reports from the front noted how the infantry would employ effective teamwork to flank these tanks, utilizing their superior numbers and tactical acumen to engage effectively. As the Marines' tactics evolved, each encounter with the Hago reshaped their approach, forcing them to adapt and innovate amidst constant threats. One particular incident stood out among the Marine ranks, a tale that became legendary in its own right. A squad stumbled upon a Hago that had become immobilized in a muddy ravine, its engines sputtering helplessly. Instead of simply marking it as a target, the Marines devised a plan that involved the use of a demolition charge. The resulting explosion was not only decisive, but elicited roars of laughter and cheers as the Hago was transformed into a smoldering hulk, a testament to American ingenuity and firepower. The story of this encounter traveled quickly through the ranks, becoming a symbol of triumph, a reminder that even in the gravest of circumstances, the human spirit could withstand the tyranny of fear through humor. Yet amid the laughter, there lay an undercurrent of respect for the Japanese soldiers who operated these tanks. Intelligence reports indicated that many of the crews displayed remarkable bravery, often charging into battle despite the overwhelming odds against them. The Marines recognized this grit, speaking of it in hushed tones, acknowledging the sacrifices made by the enemy as they continued to press their assault on the Pacific Islands. This respect complicated the narrative for the Marines, who understood that the conflict was not merely between men, but also ideas, ideologies that fueled each side's resolve. As the final days of the Iwo Jima campaign drew closer, the symbolism of the Hago lingered in the memories of those who survived it. The tank stood as a poignant reminder of an era that had defined early Japanese mechanization, forever intertwined with the mythos of marine triumph. Despite its failure in combat, the Hago had served a purpose beyond its design. It had become a vessel of storytelling, a means for the Marines to forge bonds in the crucible of war. In the aftermath, as they stood on the shores of Iwo Jima, surveying the devastation, they understood that the laughter that marked their encounters was a reflection of their resilience, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who fought against the specter of death at every turn. The battlefield at Tarawa in November 1943 was a testament to the ferocity of the Pacific theater, where every inch of ground gained came at an extraordinary cost. Amidst the cacophony of gunfire and the relentless roar of aircraft, the U.S. Marines confronted the Japanese Hago tanks with a mix of disbelief and humor. The sight of the light tanks lumbering forward, often with their crews visibly anxious, seemed almost comical against the relentless discipline of the Marines. Though the Hago had been designed with the intent to support infantry assaults, their thin armor rendered them vulnerable to the new, more effective firepower the Marines had at their disposal. The Marines had quickly adapted to the realities of modern warfare, employing their Browning .50 caliber machine guns with a level of proficiency that belied the chaos surrounding them. Each bullet struck the Hago not as a lethal projectile, but as a symbol of their superiority over an enemy that clung to outdated tactics. The sound of bullets tearing through steel echoed like laughter amongst the men. It was as if the tanks themselves were laughing at the irony of their situation. The Hago, once thought to be a formidable opponent, now appeared as a relic of a bygone era, a cruel reminder that technology had advanced faster than the strategies that governed its use. As the Marines rained down fire, they did so with a camaraderie born of shared experiences. The cacophony of laughter that arose, however, was not simply a reaction to the absurdity of battle. It represented an unspoken bond formed in the crucible of combat. Here, amidst the chaos, jokes became a shield against the horrors they faced. The Hago, with its ungraceful approach and the ineptitude of its operators, became a target for their jest, a momentary reprieve from the grim realities that war imposed. In those fleeting moments, laughter served as a balm, a reminder of their humanity amidst the technological monstrosities of war. The initial encounters with the Hago presented a clash of ideologies as much as a clash of machines. The Japanese believed in the tank's power to intimidate and dominate the battlefield, but their underestimation of American firepower became painfully evident. The Hago was designed for engagement on the basis of speed and psychological warfare, yet against the Marines' unwavering resolve, it was rendered obsolete. Each bullet that pierced its armor was a testament not only to superior arms, but also to a shift in the very nature of warfare. The Marines were not just fighting an enemy, they were battling an entire philosophy of warfare that had failed to evolve. As the battle dragged on, the humor shared among the Marines began to blend with a deeper understanding of their mortality. Each encounter with the Hago was tinted with the knowledge that they were very much alive at a time when death loomed over every decision. The tank crews, encased in their machines, were isolated in their own struggles, fighting not just the Marines, but also the sea and their own fears. The contrast between the armored vehicle and the men wielding the firepower to destroy it became emblematic of the broader struggle unfolding across the Pacific. The Marines, sweating in the tropical heat, yet emboldened by their machine guns' efficacy, embodied a spirit of resilience. The laughter that surrounded the destruction of the Hago also signified the Marines' understanding of their role in the larger war effort. Each victory, however small, represented a step toward dismantling the imperial ambitions of Japan. With every tank disabled, they were dismantling an ideology that had grown dangerously confident in its invincibility. The Hago, once a symbol of Japanese military prowess, became a mere speed bump in the relentless march of American forces. It illustrated not only a tactical advantage, but also a pressing symbolic narrative of hope against despair, of determination against the odds. As the sun sank on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the battlefield, the Marines reflected on the day's events. They had faced the Hago, not merely as a mechanical enemy, but as an embodiment of a larger conflict. The laughter and revelry transformed into a collective memory that would later be retold, an indelible mark left on their souls. The irony was not lost on them. The laughter at the Hago served a dual purpose. It was a momentary escape and a somber reminder of the reality of war, a cycle of destruction that would continue long after they left the battlefield. In the aftermath of the engagement, the Marines would carry forth the lessons learned from their encounters, each Hago tank destroyed becoming part of the lore of their experience. The blending of humor and hardship created a narrative that would transcend the battlefield, echoing through the halls of history. The Hago was more than a mere machine. It represented a pivotal moment in the evolution of armored warfare and the shifting tides of the Pacific conflict. It would be a story told not just of victory, but of resilience, a thread woven into the very fabric of Marine identity as they continued their crusade against tyranny. The battle raged on, the air thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the distant echoes of artillery, as the U.S. Marines pushed deeper into the heart of the Pacific theater. Beyond the immediate skirmishes and cannon fire lay a psychological battlefield, where the soldiers had begun to cultivate an almost cynical attitude towards their enemies. The clattering of .50 caliber rounds against the thin steel of the Japanese Hago tanks became a source of dark humor among the Marines. These light tanks, designed for mobility and equipped with a mere 37mm gun, were ill-prepared to stand against the American firepower. With every round that struck, laughter erupted as though mocking the very idea of the Hago as an effective weapon against their might. The laughter, however, served a deeper purpose than mere entertainment. It was a coping mechanism that allowed the Marines to navigate the brutality of war, imbuing them with a sense of camaraderie. Each chuckle acted as a balm against the gnawing fear that resided in the pit of their stomachs. It reminded them of their humanity, an essential component often threatened by the chaos surrounding them. Amid the clamor of battle, camaraderie became a lifeline, binding them together against the shared adversity they faced. In this context, humor morphed into an emblem of resilience, a shield that allowed them to confront the horrors of their reality. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the battlefield, the American forces advanced, confident and unwavering. Corporal James "Jimmy" O'Connor took a moment between bursts of fire to survey the wreckage of a Hago that lay smouldering near a clump of palm trees. The twisted metal resembled a grotesque sculpture, a silent testament to the ferocity of the conflict. He couldn't help but think of the men inside, their lives extinguished in an instant. The irony of such a contrast, the Marines' laughter juxtaposed against the stark reality of death, brought a moment of reflection. Jimmy quickly turned his thoughts back to the task at hand, knowing dwelling on mortality could lead to paralysis. As the Marines pressed forward, they encountered deeper layers of the enemy's defenses. The Japanese had fortified their positions, revealing an acute awareness of the terrain and a crafty adaptability. The once unruly laughter that echoed across the battlefield began to recede, replaced by the more somber tones of vigilance and focus. Each new obstacle signaled a shift in the dynamic. Sensing that their previous ease was no longer tenable, the Marines worked hard to regroup their spirits. They shared quick jokes as they maneuvered, forming a facade of confidence while acknowledging the looming danger that lurked in the shadows. Amidst this tapestry of tension and humor, the Marines encountered Sergeant Takashi Sato, a veteran of the Imperial Japanese Army. He was entrenched within the remains of a bombed-out building, his resolute nature rendering him a formidable adversary. It became evident that this battle would not just be a test of firepower, it was also a contest of will. Takashi's determination to defend his homeland ignited a fierce sense of loyalty among his fellow soldiers. The Marines began to respect the tenacity of their foes, understanding that beneath the uniforms and weaponry lay human beings, each with their own stories, fears, and dreams. For the Americans, the reality of engaging Takashi and his comrades deepened the complexity of their mission. They were not merely soldiers, they were guardians of a larger ideal, tasked with liberating a region in turmoil. Yet, in the heat of battle, the symbols of freedom and justice began to blur. The laughter that had once provided comfort slowly transformed into a bittersweet reminder of the cost of war. With each fallen opponent, they were faced with the stark truth that every victory came with its own sacrifices. The conflict escalated, and the chaos became palpable. The Marines found themselves entrenched in an unexpected urban landscape, where every corner held the potential for ambush. The laughter transformed into a strained camaraderie as the stakes grew higher and the losses began to mount. Each skirmish took a toll, and the gravity of their situation settled heavily on their shoulders. The once carefree banter began to give way to a more serious discourse about the war's purpose and their role within it. As if to punctuate this shift, a nearby explosion sent dirt and debris raining down like confetti from a funeral procession. In this newly forged reality, the laughter that had once colored their experiences now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the harshness of combat. Despite their training, the Marines grappled with the psychological toll of each encounter. The war, which had begun as an abstraction, now clawed at their souls, demanding a reckoning with the implications of their actions. The irony of their earlier mirth, their joking demeanor towards the Hago, now felt misplaced, a ghost of innocence lost amid the rubble of conflict. As the sun set on another grueling day, the Marines reflected on the paradoxes of their existence. In their pursuit of victory, they had become both the protectors of their nation and unwitting harbingers of destruction. The Japanese soldiers, including Takashi, were not monsters, but fellow humans caught in a brutal struggle that transcended national borders. The laughter that had once echoed through the air now faded, replaced by a profound understanding of the heavy price of war, a lesson that would leave an indelible mark on their hearts long after the final shots were fired. The sun blazed down on the Pacific Theater, illuminating the rugged terrain where the U.S. Marines were entrenched in a brutal conflict. Amongst the din of gunfire, laughter erupted as a Japanese Hago tank rumbled forward, its vulnerability exposed under the scrutiny of seasoned Marines. They were not jesting out of disrespect, but rather from an understanding of the stark technological chasm between their armored capabilities and those of their adversaries. The Hago, designed for mobility rather than firepower, was a symbol of desperation. It was a testament to Japan's industrial limitations, a stark reminder that sheer will, however fierce, could not compensate for sufficient resources. The Marines stood in formation, rifles at the ready, their camaraderie forged in the furnace of combat. As the Hago approached, they marveled at its thin armor, reminiscent of paper rather than metal, and the laughter only intensified. Each burst from their 50 caliber machine guns was met with the tank's defiant advance, a juxtaposition of bravado and impending failure. It was in this moment that the dichotomy of strength and vulnerability became painfully clear. The tank's crew, steadfast and resolute, had no conception of the absurdity of their situation. Their belief in their technology mirrored the larger Japanese strategy, one rooted in a grave miscalculation of their enemy's capabilities. As the round struck, the clinking sound of metal against metal echoed through the air, punctuated with the satisfying thud of armor giving way. The Marines found humor in their advantage, a coping mechanism for the grim realities of war that lay beyond the horizon. Their laughter, a spontaneous act of rebellion against fear, reverberated through the ranks. It was a reminder that resilience can manifest in unexpected ways, even when death loomed nearby. The Hago, in all its earnestness, became an unwitting participant in this theater of absurdity, a catalyst for a fleeting sense of superiority among the Marines. Yet, as the tank's turrets swiveled in a futile attempt to retaliate, the Marines' merriment shifted. The laughter faded when the crew began to return fire, their shells arcing beautifully, but ultimately ineffectively, above the Marines' heads. The realization that even the most comical of encounters could turn deadly cast a shadow over their earlier glee. This confrontation was no longer a mere exercise in mockery. It was a stark reminder that every soldier, regardless of the equipment they wielded, was anchored in a shared mortality. Even the Hago's unlikely presence here, in the heart of the battle, embodied the fragility of human ambition against the relentless tide of warfare. The Marines advanced, their spirits buoyed by the perceived ineffectiveness of their adversary. They had not yet grasped the full implications of the battle that raged in the Pacific, where resilience fought tooth and nail against despair. The Pacific was a vast expanse, dotted with islands that held significance far beyond their geography. They were the front line of a clash between ideologies and ambitions. In their laughter, the Marines overlooked the complexity of their struggle. The Hago might have been a simple machine, yet it represented the resolve of a nation unwilling to capitulate. With every round that penetrated the tank's thin armor, they were not just dismantling a piece of machinery, but a symbol of an enemy's resolve. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the battlefield, the atmosphere shifted. The humor that had buoyed the Marines evaporated as they watched the enemy's crew scramble. Their earlier laughter transformed into a somber silence, as the echoes of war reminded them of the lives forever altered in pursuit of victory. In that silence, the realization struck that each Hago destroyed was a life extinguished, a component in a larger machinery of conflict that churned relentlessly. The laughter morphed into reflection, fostering an understanding of the weight of their actions. Every bullet fired was a step closer to both triumph and tragedy. Amid the chaos, the groundwork for a deeper realization began to emerge. The juxtaposition of the Hago's vulnerability and the Marines' laughter represented a tension that defined warfare itself. In their moment of victory, a lingering question hovered. What truly constituted success in this theater? The tank, an embodiment of Japan's engineering efforts, no longer appeared merely as a target, but as part of a larger human struggle. Each round they fired now tethered them to the broader implications of their conflict. Both nations were locked in a battle not just for territory, but for existence. As the fighting continued, the Hago was relegated to a mere footnote in the Marines' experiences, yet its presence lingered. It became a tangible reminder of the absurd struggles of war, where both sides grappled with the futility of conflict. As the sun set, casting a crimson hue over the battlefield, the Marines were left to confront the broader narrative of their struggle, not just against a single tank, but against an ideology that had swept across vast oceans. They realized that laughter could only carry them so far, and the true weight of their duty lay in the moral complexities that war imposed upon them. The Hago, a fleeting figure of mockery, would forever haunt their memories, a symbol of both triumph and the human cost of war. The sun hung low in the sky over Saipan, casting long shadows over the battlefield as U.S. Marines continued their relentless advance against the Japanese positions. The air was thick with tension and the acrid scent of gunpowder mingling with the salt of the nearby Pacific Ocean. In this theater of war, the Japanese Type 95 Hago tank, though once a source of pride for its designers, had become emblematic of Japan's challenges in matching the Allies' technological advances. Marines positioned behind makeshift cover erupted into raucous laughter as bullets impacted the thin armor, their mirth punctuating the grim background of conflict. It was a peculiar paradox. The Hago, dressed in a coat of earth tones and agile in its intended theater, had been reduced to mere comic relief amidst the chaos of battle. As the afternoon progressed, the laughter of the Marines served as both a coping mechanism and a morale booster. The Type 95, with its two-man turret and a low profile, was designed to outmaneuver heavier tanks, but its 37mm gun paled in comparison to the firepower wielded by American forces. The story of this tank echoed the broader narrative of Japan's military ambitions during the early war years, marked by aggressive posturing but increasingly vulnerable to the innovations of their rivals. Commanders had hoped for a nip-and-tuck advantage over their enemies, but as advanced weaponry continued to flood the battlefield, the Hago's limitations became glaringly evident. Each bullet that struck it not only tore through metal, but also stripped away the illusion of invulnerability that the Imperial Japanese Army had sought to project. The Marines stationed on the ridge recalled the briefing before the assault, where they had been informed of the enemy's alleged strengths. The tales of elite Japanese troops, their indomitable will, and the formidable machinery of war had been woven into their training. Yet, reality had shattered these narratives. As the Hago sputtered and jerked under the onslaught of fire, the Marines realized that the fears instilled in them would not manifest here. Instead, their focus shifted to the comedy of their situation, finding humor in the grimness as they watched the tank's futile attempts to escape. It served as a reminder that in warfare, the line between fear and laughter could blur, and survival often hinged on maintaining one's spirit against the rising tide of death and destruction. Among the Marines was Corporal Jim McCarthy, who had grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania. He had been captivated by tales of heroism and valor, but now his experience felt surreal. The laughter echoed through the ranks, a collective catharsis that reminded them of their humanity amidst the dehumanizing brutality of war. Each burst of laughter felt like reclaiming a small piece of their souls, a stand against the horror confronting them. The Hago's demise became a symbol of their struggle. It represented the fragility of the Japanese war machine, and in a strange way, mirrored the uncertainty each Marine faced as they pressed forward. For them, it was more than just a battle. It was a wrestle with their own fears, a fight to retain their sanity against overwhelming odds. As the afternoon turned to evening, the laughter waned, and the battlefield settled back into its haunting silence. The realization that they still had much ground to cover loomed over the Marines like a thick fog. The Hago could be seen as just one tank among many, yet its destruction resonated deeply within the unit. The humor they had found was a temporary balm, but the harsh reality of their mission steadily reasserted itself. In the distance, other Japanese tanks readied themselves, their silhouettes ominous against the setting sun. This was a momentary reprieve. The true test awaited just beyond their field of vision. The Japanese response came swiftly. The sound of artillery fire cracked through the air as their forces regrouped, adapting to the Marines' advances in what had been a rapidly changing battlefield. The laughter that had filled the air moments before now faded into the tension of anticipation. Corporal McCarthy felt a tightening in his chest, the lightness of laughter replaced by the weight of dread. He understood now that the joy they had shared was fleeting, a fragile moment that would not hold against the oncoming forces. The camaraderie that had blossomed amidst the chaos was crucial, yet it would be tested in unforeseen ways as the tide of battle shifted once again. With each passing minute, the landscape of war morphed. The Hago, once a target of derision, became a grave reminder of the stakes involved. It now lay smoldering on the battlefield, a silent testament to the rapid unfolding of fate. The Marines recognized that the humor they had found in the tank's demise mirrored their own struggles. They, too, were vulnerable, and the laughter had masked an undercurrent of fear. They were all mere players in a larger game, one that would demand more than just bravery. It would require resilience, adaptability, and the ability to find meaning amidst the chaos. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange hue across the battlefield, the Marines steeled themselves for the night ahead. The laughter of earlier felt distant now, overshadowed by the reality of their circumstances. They were warriors on a perilous mission, carrying not just weapons, but also the weight of their hopes and fears. The Hago had been a moment of levity, but it had also transformed into a poignant symbol of the struggle to survive in a world where the stakes were life and death. In that moment, the Marines understood that laughter was but a temporary refuge. As the night consumed the battlefield, they braced themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. As the sun climbed higher over the strewn wreckage of the battlefield, the laughter of the U.S. Marines echoed through the acrid air, filled with the tang of gunpowder and the unmistakable smell of burning metal. The Hago tanks, once a source of pride for the Imperial Japanese Army, now lay vulnerable and exposed, their armor punctured with .50 caliber bullets as if they were mere toys. The Marines, seasoned warriors hardened by countless days of combat, viewed this moment with a mix of triumph and disbelief. In the midst of what should have been a deadly confrontation, humor became their shield. They exchanged jokes about the tank's ineffectiveness against American firepower, their laughter a remedy for the stress and chaos of war. The Hago's design had once seemed formidable on paper, boasting a low profile and a relatively lightweight form meant to enhance mobility. However, the realities of warfare in the Pacific theater told a different story. As the Marines adapted their strategies to counter the evolving threats posed by the Japanese forces, they learned to exploit weaknesses that earlier in the conflict had gone unnoticed. The Hago, designed to support infantry and equipped with a .37mm gun, had become hopelessly outmatched against the newly deployed American weaponry. Each penetrating bullet transformed the tank into a mere relic of ambition, highlighting the shift in power dynamics on the battlefield. Among the Marines, Corporal James "Jimmy" Cartwright emerged as an emblematic figure. He stood atop a sandbagged position, binoculars clenched tightly in his hand, scanning the horizon as he gave voice to the unease that lurked beneath the laughter. "Think about it, fellas," he called out, his tone shifting from light-hearted to contemplative. "These guys thought they could roll over us with those tin cans. Look where we are now." His words resonated, reminding them that the very laughter they shared belied the harsh truth of their situation. Though they had gained the upper hand, the horrors of combat were never far behind. As they drew closer to capturing their objectives, every victory came at a cost that each Marine grappled with internally. The Hago's failures did not stem solely from its armor, but were also indicative of broader strategic miscalculations by the Japanese command. Underestimating the resolve and tactical ingenuity of their adversaries, the imperial leadership pressed on with an engagement strategy that relied heavily on outdated technologies and assumptions. The cunning and adaptability displayed by the Marines contrasted sharply with the rigidity of Japanese tactics, symbolizing a clash not only of weapons but of ideologies. This stark juxtaposition fortified the Marines' resolve, reinforcing their belief that the flexibility of their mission would outlast the rigidity of their opponents' designs. Yet, amidst the laughter lurked the specter of loss. Each Marine had faced friends and comrades who had fallen to the same Japanese forces they now mocked. Private First Class Thomas "Tommy" Rivera, recalling his childhood friends back home, felt a chill run through him as he took stock of the battlefield. The laughter, while a balm for their collective trauma, could not erase the faces of those who would never return. For some, like Tommy, the humor served as a temporary distraction, a fragile shield against the grief that threatened to engulf them. Their shared laughter was a coping mechanism, a means to navigate the harsh realities of their environment, yet it also veiled the deeper questions of purpose and sacrifice. As the Marines continued their offensive, they seized upon the moment to regroup. In the aftermath of their assault on the Hago tanks, they prepared for the inevitable counterattack that they knew would come. The commanding officers began to reinforce their positions, utilizing the seized Japanese equipment to turn the tides further in their favor. The sight of a captured Hago, stripped of its menacing aura, became a potent emblem of the shifting landscape of the war. It represented not only a tactical victory, but an ideological one, a symbol of the resilience of the Marines and their ability to adapt, to evolve even in the direst of circumstances. The battlefield was changing, as was the psyche of the Marines. The laughter gave way to resolve, bonding them in ways that transcended their individual fears. As they fortified their defenses and prepared for the next move, they began to contemplate their place in the greater conflict. Each bullet discharged, each tank disabled, and every fallen soldier etched deeper into their memory the understanding that they were not merely fighting for victory, they were fighting for each other, for the lives that had been irrevocably altered by the cataclysm of war. This camaraderie, although born from dark circumstances, blossomed into an unspoken promise, a pledge to honor the sacrifices of their fallen brothers. Each Marine carried forward the weight of those who had fought before them, shaping their battle into a testament of endurance against the backdrop of history. They knew that the war would not be won solely through sheer might. It would be secured through the bonds of brotherhood formed in the heat of battle. The Hago tanks, once symbols of Japanese might, had become vessels of inspiration, propelling the Marines to dig deeper within themselves, reminding them that even in times of mirth, the specter of war demanded respect and remembrance. The sun hung low over the Pacific, casting long shadows on the war-torn landscape of Saipan as U.S. Marines regrouped for their next push against the entrenched Japanese forces. The remnants of the Hago tanks, once symbols of pride and technological progress, lay scattered across the battlefield, their armor rendered ineffective against the relentless barrage of American firepower. As Marine units exchanged stories of victory and laughter echoed in the ranks, the juxtaposition of camaraderie amid the grim reality of war painted a complex picture of the human experience in combat. The Hago, despite its shortcomings, had become an inadvertent source of amusement, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, humor could persist. The Marines, emboldened by their successes, advanced with a renewed sense of purpose. The bullet-riddled remains of the Hago served not only as a testament to their firepower, but as a psychological tool to further demoralize the enemy. The laughter that erupted among the soldiers was imbued with a mixture of bravado and relief. It was a coping mechanism, a means to reclaim agency in a theater where the uncertainties of life and death unfolded daily. The psychological landscape shifted, revealing the complexities of war, where every victory over an enemy vehicle was not just a tactical win, but a symbolic defeat for the Japanese forces. As the Marines prepared for the next assault, Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Burwell Puller, a storied figure with an indomitable spirit, rallied his men. Puller's reputation for leadership and courage had made him a legend within his own ranks. His words, laced with authenticity, resonated deeply, reminding the Marines of their mission's larger purpose. Each tank we take down isn't just metal. It represents a challenge, a foe willing to fight to the last. We are here to ensure they do not succeed. This call to arms, though steeped in the realities of death and destruction, was also a charge for resilience and fortitude amid the chaos of human conflict. The battlefield became a canvas of destruction, where the sounds of gunfire and the cries of wounded souls mingled in the air. The Marines pushed forward, navigating through craters and debris that once held the promise of life. Each step forward felt heavy with the weight of sacrifice, yet the resolve solidified their purpose. Faces contorted in concentration, seasoned veterans and fresh recruits alike shared a common bond, not merely of survival, but of a brotherhood forged in the fires of combat. The laughter at the Hago had transformed into a shared understanding that each moment was fleeting, each interaction a connection amidst the inevitable loss. In the distance, a new wave of Japanese soldiers emerged, their resolve unbroken despite the setbacks. They were men who believed fervently in their cause, just as the Marines did in theirs. This clash was not merely a skirmish of arms, but a collision of ideologies, each side striving to assert dominance over the other. The Marines' mocking tone toward the Hago stood in stark contrast to the resolve of their opponents, symbolizing the dichotomy of perception in warfare. What one side deemed an object of derision, the other embraced with grim determination. Amid the advancing chaos, a sergeant stumbled upon a field of personal effects scattered across a former battleground, items that told stories of lives once lived, now reduced to remnants of memory. A child's drawing, a soldier's photograph, a rusted watch. These artifacts bore witness to the deeply human side of warfare. The Marines paused to reflect, momentarily suspended in time, a brief acknowledgement of the pain and loss that transcended uniforms and national boundaries. It was in these moments of reflection that the surreal nature of the absurd collided with the brutal realities, creating a profound awareness of the cost of conflict. The battle raged into the evening, and as darkness descended, the weight of the day's actions hung heavily on the Marines' minds. The enemy was not merely a faceless adversary, they were individuals, each with their own stories and motivations. It was this realization that transformed laughter into a bittersweet understanding, that while triumph over the Hago had bolstered morale, the war itself grimly continued. The laughter faded into silence as the Marines prepared to engage once more, steeling themselves for the next wave of aggression. As dawn broke, illuminating the battlefield anew, the Marines resumed their advance. The sun illuminated the charred remains of the Hago tanks, now serving as memorials to the brutality of the ongoing conflict. The remnants of machinery, once heralded as the future of warfare, lay as harbingers of an era marked by both technological progress and human loss. The Marines, with their spirits lifted but hearts heavy, charged forth, understanding that each moment on the battlefield was not just a battle against the enemy, but a fight for their own humanity amid the encroaching darkness of war. In the end, The laughter that had echoed against the metal armor of the Hago served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to find levity even in the most dire circumstances. Yet it also underscored the complex tapestry of emotions woven into the fabric of combat, where joy and sorrow coexisted in a dance as old as warfare itself. As the Marines pressed forward, the echoes of their laughter lingered in the air, a testament to their shared determination, their unyielding spirit, and the relentless pursuit of victory in the face of overwhelming odds. As the echoes of laughter faded and the dust settled on the battlefield, the events surrounding the U.S., Marines and the Japanese Hago tank serve as a poignant reminder of the complex interplay between innovation and destructiveness in warfare. The ease with which those 50-caliber bullets perforated the armor of a once-feared adversary underscores not only the evolution of military technology, but also the shifting tides of a conflict that would shape the course of nations. This narrative invites us to reflect on the human experiences entwined with war, where moments of humor can coexist alongside the grim realities of combat. It challenges us to consider the lives behind the uniforms, Marines and Japanese soldiers alike, whose stories are often overshadowed by the grand narratives of victory and defeat. In remembering these moments, we bear the responsibility to honor the sacrifices made and the lessons learned, ensuring that the past informs our present and guides our future. Such reflections compel us to seek understanding and foster peace, acknowledging that the legacy of conflict is best remembered not just through tales of triumph, but through the shared humanity that persists amidst the chaos of war.